Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Audrey Watters keynote on our final day of the Learning 2.0 conference. Thanks for being here, and Audrey, this is really fun. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
Really delighted to have Audrey here. As many of you may know, Audrey and I do a weekly podcast under the banner of her Hack Education blog, covering the news and the events. That's at hackeducation.com. Please check it out if you haven't been there. Audrey has lots of interesting things to say. She does so in a snarky way. Thanks to Follett and Intel for supporting the conference, and thanks for sponsoring the conference, and thanks to Mighty Bell, Blackboard Collaborate, Taking It Global, EdWeb, and Edutopia for support in kind by helping let people know about the conference. Audrey, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. Thanks for inviting me to speak here today. I wanted to apologize to anyone if my audio is bad. I'm working as usual with hotel Wi-Fi, but it seems to be a little subpar today. I'm really, really honored to have been invited to speak, particularly with some of the other luminaries who are also giving keynotes at this event. Of course, anytime you speak among such experts and in front of educators as well, I tend to feel a bit like a fraud, as I've been sanctioned by no degree granting institution to speak on these subjects. Really, I'm here with just a strong sense of what's right, what's interesting, and in some cases, and in cases of what I'll talk about today, what's sort of gravely wrong with the direction we're going with technology and education. My academic background is actually neither in technology nor in education. I'm a PhD dropout. I'm 2 chapters into a dissertation in comparative literature on the subject of the avant-garde, street theater, and anarchism, which is apropos of nothing, you might argue, or I would argue that it's sort of completely relevant, because when we talk about the future of education, we have to remember that this is always deeply political and deeply cultural. But really, it's the background in my background in literature, as well as my background in being a big geek, that makes me often think of science fiction when I want to talk about the future of ed tech. In fact, this is what comes to mind, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. More precisely, I want to talk to you about what I've identified as one of the major trends in education technology in 2012, and that's robots in the classroom. Now, by this, I don't necessarily mean a schoolhouse version of C-3PO, although the Gates Foundation could possibly be funding such a thing. I have no idea. But rather, I want to talk about the move I'm seeing towards the use of artificial intelligence and automation in education software. That's a technological move, to be sure, but again, it's also something that's very political and very cultural. Now, the great thing about being a journalist or a blogger is that sometime in December or in January, you get to make your predictions about what you think will be the hot new trends of the new year. And then throughout the year, you get to choose and frame the stories and write the headlines that make you seem terribly wise and awfully prescient. And when I say I was awfully prescient, I want to stress the awfulness, really, more than my prescience. This is my headline from April: Robot Graders. Again, robot graders, robot graders, robot graders. I should note I didn't write all these stories. Robots will replace humans, but robots are going to be replacing other professions as well. It's not just teachers here that the headlines suggest are going to be outmoded. It's lawyers. There's actually a law firm in California called Robot, and Wrong, incidentally, and it's only partially a joke that 2 of the partners in the law firm are computers. But of course, once we get rid of the lawyers, no one will complain about human rights violations and robot armies. But that's fine, right? When robots can work in nursing homes, there's a movie opening this weekend about precisely that. Robots can hold us while we die. Robots can perform surgery, and robots can now debone chickens. This is actually quite a remarkable achievement. As one of the things that has prevented robot chicken deboning in the past, as the subheading reads here, is that all chickens, even factory farmed chickens, are actually slightly different. And as such, it's really been a challenge to create a robot, to program a robot that can make these allowances and exceptions as it plucks and carves and debones. So this is actually not a tangent. I mean, it's sort of a tangent, but and maybe it's sort of just a conceptual stretch here. But if we've reached a level where we can train robots to recognize all the anatomical differences elsewhere, right, say in a chicken bone structure, what are the implications for recognizing other differences, say the cognitive differences in humans? Can we train robots to help us in all of our uniqueness to learn? Can robots offer personalized learning? Okay, this is an early morning gratuitous chicken boning image here, and I'm sorry for starting off your Friday with this. But as any good science fiction fan will probably respond to the fact that we've created this sort of level of sophistication of robot butchery, this is the sort of thing that might just freak you out, right? Who wants to have robots that have been trained with precise knife skills? That should set off all sorts of warning bells. Of course, readers of Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, will say, oh, it's not a problem, right? Of course we can train robots to debone chickens, and we will always remain safe as humans because we have the 3 laws of robotics, right? And a little refresher here in case it's been a while since you've read Asimov. Rule number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. Rule number 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Rule number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. And of course, the lesser known law, the zeroth law, a robot may not harm humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm. So in other words, robots are obedient, but according to Asimov, at least, they're here to help us, not harm us. Of course, they do have this built-in self-preservation mode to think about. Now, of course, not all robots have been informed of the 3 laws of robotics in fiction or in chicken deboning factories. So I think it's worth thinking a little bit here about the implications of robotics. And I think too that this is where my literary background comes into place, right? This is where I think as well that science fiction, Asimov, and the 3 laws of robotics are a window into questions about ethics, about automation, efficiency, labor, work, and learning. So just a quick review of the literature here. Now, arguably, since its inception, right, which most folks date to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that would be the novel, not the 1818 novel, I should note, not this 1931 Hollywood film. Science fiction has been a way for us to think about science, right, the sacred, the profane, the creation of life, the creation of artificial intelligence, intellectual pursuits, experimentation, all of the basic questions, or really the fundamental question even, what does it mean to be human? Now, the creation of artificial life has been like at the heart, as I said, of science fiction, even the earliest science fiction in the case of Frankenstein, But robots specifically are, no surprise here, largely an industrial and machine age literary phenomenon. The term was actually coined in 1921 by the Czech playwright Karel Čapek. And incidentally here, the Czech word robota can be translated roughly as serf or slave. And so as such, robots always raise questions for us about workers, about working conditions, about exploitation and revolution, right? Frankenstein's monster wanted to kill his father, but robots want to take over the world. Now, of course, as our mechanized and hopefully docile robot workforce, they do promise efficiency. They'll do the jobs that arguably we don't want to do. But what's interesting is that robots then are often embodied and gendered in ways that reflect whose work we value and how work is valued here. Again, this is important to think about in robots in education. Of course, robots can be evil. Again, note the gender here. They can be emotionless. Again, questions of gender. Sometimes robots struggle with emotion, with control of their emotions. Sometimes they're revolutionaries, but sometimes they are the law. Now, this is a lot of pop culture baggage, I think, that really does have interesting implications of how we conceive of robots, but how as well we're going to be thinking about automated teaching systems, adaptive learning software, right? So there are issues of gender, questions of emotion, relationships, certainly work, unfortunately, that's not culturally respected. Learning is a process that's messy, it's inefficient, it's a place where labor is unionized and often deemed as unruly. And so in some ways, it's something that needs and demands efficiency, order, and law. Now, I'll just pause here for a movie recommendation. If it's the one thing that you can walk away with today and thank me for, it's to check out this movie, The Class of 1999. Unfortunately, I don't even think it's available on Netflix, but I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But it's really an unappreciated classic of the school-related movie genres. It stars Stacy Keach, Malcolm McDowell, and the always awesome Pam Grier. And I know that the IMDb score is 5.3, but really, do check it out. Of course, science fiction has a lot to say not just about automated teaching, but automated learning. There are lots of scenes in science fiction that reflect, I think, a popular and very problematic view of education as a content delivery system. My favorite, of course, being Keanu Reeves, the world's greatest living actor, delivering one of his finest lines, right, as a computer injects directly into his brainstem all the knowledge that he needs. Whoa, I know Kung Fu. Now, you could argue that this is all science fiction, that the reality is different, that we have far more sophisticated ways of thinking about of education and of robots. But I contend that really what our culture produces in the film studio and what is produced at the novelist's desk isn't really separable from what happens in the lab, from what happens at a programmer's terminal. Cultural expectations feed all of this, right? Culture does shape science as well as science fiction. Now, of course, as this conference isn't a literature science fiction conference, this is a technology conference, let's just take a look at some of the science behind robots as well. So this year marks the 100th anniversary of the 100th birthday of this man, Alan Turing. He's incredibly influential in the development of computer science and cryptography. He's generally recognized as the father of artificial intelligence. Now, the field of artificial intelligence is the science of creating intelligent machines. Artificial intelligence relies in part on machine learning, that is, teaching computers to adapt their behaviors algorithmically, right, i.e. to learn. and natural language processing, that is, teaching computers to understand input from humans that isn't necessarily written in code. Now, Turing designed what's known as the Turing test. In his 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, he posed what's been a long debated question: can a machine think? Turing argued that framing it that way, that the question's really a bit too ambiguous. What is thinking, he said. That's something for the philosophers, not technologists, to decide. So the Turing test asks instead, can computers imitate humans? And more precisely, can a computer engage in a conversation with a human and fool that person into thinking he or she is talking to another human? If the human can't tell after 5 minutes, then boom, that's intelligence. Perhaps one of the best known examples of a proto-AI program that could not pass the Turing test is the program called ELIZA, which was written by Joseph Weizenbaum in the mid-1960s at MIT. ELIZA, and again, do note the female name here, simulates psychotherapy. It asks patients a question and responds to him or her via a chat interface. Now again, this isn't just science fiction. In fact, we do use a variation of the Turing test almost every day on the web in order to distinguish humans from machines. The completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart, in fact, or better known as CAPTCHA. We use AI more and more frequently in other aspects of our lives too. If you're an iPhone 4S user, you probably already have the power to do so. Of course, if you're like me, you only ever talk to Siri, the artificial intelligence on your phone, in order to troll her for funny responses, like, Siri, what are the 3 laws of robotics? Incidentally, Wolfram Alpha, which is the technology on which she's partially based, has a far, far better answer. Now, artificial intelligence enables other things as well, not just queries like this or spam prevention. Most famously, perhaps, is Google's self-driving vehicles. On the left here, Sebastian Thrun, AI researcher, inventor of the self-driving car, and, oh yes, the teacher of the largest online course ever, Stanford's Artificial Intelligence MOOC, and now founder of a for-profit education startup, Udacity. Hopefully you can sort of see how things come full circle here. Right? The Stanford MOOCs, Udacity, Coursera, the other startups that spun out, they don't just teach artificial intelligence. They also use artificial intelligence as part of the assessment mechanism. After all, if you're going to have 150,000 students in your classroom, you're surely not going to hire a bunch of teaching assistants to grade their homework, right? You're going to write a program, you're going to automate it. Now, people have been working on these sorts of automated assessment and tutoring programs now for almost 100 years. In some ways, fine-tuning these systems has long been the holy grail of education technology. That is, can you write software that offers personalized feedback that responds to each and every individual student's skills and needs? Now, honestly, these systems really haven't become terribly sophisticated, and that's in part because they rely on multiple choice tests. But what makes these programs adaptive is that based on the student's responses to multiple choice tests, the programs can then follow up with what they think are the next best question for that student, right? They're aimed precisely at the right level of difficulty. That's not a particularly complicated algorithm. Well, so says the person that dropped out of a PhD program in comparative literature, but it's not really that complicated. It's based on item response theory, something that dates back to the 1950s. But nevertheless, the pressure is on to to make software that's more adaptive, that's more personalized, so the marketing speak goes, but also to expand the capability outside the realm of multiple choice testing. And to that end, earlier this year, the Hewlett Foundation sponsored a contest to see if it could get some of the best minds in the world in machine learning to apply their talents to design a programmatic way to automate the grading, not of multiple choice tests. Again, we've been doing that for almost a century, but to automate the grading of essays. So the Hewlett Foundation put up a $100,000 bounty out for someone that could come up with an algorithm that grades as well as humans do. Hence, the rise of the robot essay graders. The results, according to the Hewlett Foundation and according to researchers at Tagle and the University of Akron, were positive. Not only is it possible to automate essay grading, they found that robots do this just as well as human essay graders do. Right? So they studied how they studied their algorithms and compared it to the way in which states that manually use humans to grade them. Okay. Of course, investors, big testing companies, textbook publishers, unemployed robots, perhaps with degrees in English literature, they were all thrilled, right? Notice what's exciting here. The scoring systems are fast, accurate, and cost-effective. Now, of course, as a former writing teacher myself, and as a graduate student who paid her way through school working as such, I can't help but stop and ask some questions here. I can't help but ask questions about labor, but I also can't help but wonder what it means to tell our students that we're not actually going to read their papers. We're going to scan them, and a computer is going to analyze them instead. I think robot graders raise all sorts of questions about thinking machines and about thinking humans, about self-expression and creativity, about the purpose of writing assignments, and the purpose of education. And I hope, really hope, it prompts us to ask questions about why and when do we encourage efficiency in education. After all, it is efficiency here that is touted as the rationale. A computer can grade 16,000 SAT essays in 20 seconds. And so the argument goes, if a teacher doesn't have to worry about reading students' work, they can assign more essays. They can and assign less multiple choice tests. They can have more students in their class. They can have hundreds of thousands of students even. Of course, when I ask these questions, the folks at Pearson tell me that I'm missing the point, but they would, wouldn't they? Now, not everyone is sold on the idea that robot graders are actually the future, right? MIT's Les Perelman, who heads up that university's writing program, has been a long-time outspoken opponent of automated grading software. He argues that it's actually really pretty easy to fool it. He's demonstrated ways in which you can fool the robot grader, and if you don't think students will try to fool robot graders, then you really don't know students, and you've never received a 5-page essay submitted in like 18-point font with 3-inch margins. But I digress. The fooling robots does take some skill here, but it's an interesting skill because it's not because the skill that robots are supposedly assessing is something different than humans look at. Robots don't actually read papers the way humans do. They do things like they assess word frequency, they assess word placement, they look at word pairing, word length, sentence length, do you use conjunctions, do you use punctuation. Interestingly, comma frequency is a major indicator as to how well these essays score. So the more commas, apparently, the better, which as a former writing teacher, I say, no, not necessarily, but again, what do I know? I'm a PhD dropout. I also tend to use commas far too frequently. But as writing professor Alex Reed notes, if computers can read like people, it's because we have trained people to read like computers. Now he's speaking here specifically about the human graders that these robots were actually compared to. The major testing companies, they hire a range of people to grade essays for them. They aren't necessarily writing or English teachers, although sometimes they are. But these graders don't have a personal relationship with students, obviously. These graders are actually given a very strict rubric to follow. And a rubric, no surprise, is something that computers can do with more precision. Human graders are discouraged from recognizing any creative expression in the essays that they read. Robot graders, of course, have no idea what creative expression even means. So what does it mean if we encourage students to express themselves in such a way that appeases the robot essay graders, that answers an automated rubric? What happens when we discourage creative expression? Are we confusing here teaching and programming? What counts? Who counts as a thinking machine? What counts as learning? Now, these aren't new questions at all. There's actually a long history of viewing learning programmatically and of imagining our jobs as educators as filling students' minds with information. It's one of the eerily awful promises of education technology, that we can do this better, that we can standardize it, that we can replicate it, that we can scale it to hundreds of thousands of students. It's the promise that eventually we'll be able to all instantly learn Kung Fu or receive whatever data our captain deems necessary. It's the promise that someday we will have order and efficiency in the face of what is otherwise a very messy process. And I find that so chilling. As the French anarchist philosopher Jacques Ellul made an argument back in the early 1960s, this is in fact something that society is absolutely hurtling towards: more efficiency and more automation. It's what drives us socially as well as scientifically. The human brain must be made to conform to the much more advanced brain of the machine, he wrote. And education will no longer be an unpredictable and exciting adventure for human enlightenment, but an exercise in conformity, an apprenticeship to whatever gadgetry is useful in the technical world. Now, okay, I'm probably being a bit of a doomsayer here, but it is fairly clear that 2012 is really an important year for robots. Actually, I read a story in the BBC yesterday that a robot at Yale has gained a sort of self-awareness as it can recognize itself in the mirror. So I'm trying not to panic. Keep calm, carry on, but please do think about the implications and the ethics of robots and of drones as well. We are on the cusp of some really incredible breakthroughs with automation, chicken deboners, robot graders, and otherwise. And we're witnessing a lot of buzz and hype, right or wrong, about automation and education, about adaptive learning systems, and similar tools that can be used to make education more efficient and more cost-effective. The marketing promises that this is going to make education more personalized. But what do we mean by personalized, right? How are we going to proceed with our technology adoption? What matters to us? What matters? What values will we instill in our robots? This slide. As Steve says, does this sound inefficient? Does this sound wasteful? Of course it does. Damn right it does. We don't want young people, but if we don't want young people of all backgrounds to experiment with ideas and identities because it seems too expensive to support it, we have to ask ourselves, what sort of society are we trying to become? this is why I actually really do like the 3 laws of robotics very much, particularly the zeroth law, which reminds us about robots and the harm to humanity. After all, humanity and learning are deeply, deeply intertwined. Do we need to devise 3 laws of EdTech robotics? Right? What would those entail? Because either we decide what this new technology means for us, or someone else will. Sorry, I made this in Photoshop and I had to throw that in there. So a couple of final thoughts here, and then I'll take some questions. Perhaps we can have some discussions based on what's going on in the chat. But first, this question of the uncanny valley. And this is a theory in the field of robotics and animation and human-computer interaction, which contends that when human replicas look and act almost, but not perfectly like actual human beings, they cause us to feel revulsion. The valley in question there is the little dip in the graph. And I raise this notion because the robots that are currently in the classroom, they don't look like Pam Grier, who of course is never revolting. They don't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is always revolting. But it's mostly software that we don't see. So how does this impact our view on automation and robots in the classroom? Are we even noticing that this is happening? And how will it change when robots, physical robots, do enter the classroom? South Korea has actually been experimenting with robots. As you can see in this photo, they aren't humanoid at all. Apparently, egg shape and sort of penguin-like flightless wings are not revolting. What I actually love about this photo is that according to the kids in the very back, robots in the classroom aren't really that compelling either. So that's sort of a win for humans. But a second point, kids' thoughts on robots are actually really important to consider here too. And maybe that's because they haven't actually seen Alien yet, right? They've not watched Terminator. They don't know who Hal is. They only know Wall-E. But robots are actually how we're encouraging many students to become involved with science and technology as well. And no surprise, kids really love robots. Researchers actually asked kids recently to draw how they imagined robots could be used in their day-to-day lives. What would kids want from robots? What would robots do for them? And the research found kids want robots to be their friends. They think robots will care. And they want robots to help them learn. This is a girl from Australia. Larry the robot said to me, "Look, math is an important part of your life, and you'll be using it a lot in the future. If you don't do maths now with me, I won't be a close friend." I said, "Okay, I will do it." So we raced each other with multiplication, and he won. But I got a better score than I got at school. Every time we did it, I got better and started to kind of like maths. When we finished, I said to Larry, "Thanks for caring about me." And here's another one. Boy from Germany. "The robot is like a new friend for me. It helps me with my homework. It can do much better than my parents because it knows exactly how to explain the lessons to a kid like me. The robot is very smart, can answer a lot of questions for me and tell me interesting stories. He always reminds me of all possible things, which I would have otherwise forgotten." Of course, kids, maybe I'm raising all sorts of false alarms here. Kids want friendship. Kids want caring when they learn. Of course, we might want to ask, are those things missing in their classrooms now? And of course, maybe my literary background is getting the best of me, Cassandras and whatnot. I even started a Tumblr recently, collecting links of robot news in general, titled The Robot Chronicles, and it was subtitled, "Don't say I didn't warn you." But I do want to raise some questions here. I think we can work things out intelligently, calmly, without a Skynet-like future. Or perhaps not. Perhaps we'll just shrug and figure out that the robots will handle things better, including our education system, that they'll do a better job than humans have. That's certainly the argument that you'll hear folks make. let computers do what computers do best. Of course, that assumes that computers are autonomous beings and not tools. Even famed Jeopardy champion Ken Jennings, when he lost to a computer, IBM's Watson, said that he was willing to bow down to his robot overlords, citing, of course, a pop culture reference. But that's the thing, isn't it? That's what I've tried to demonstrate today. Science fiction has shaped how we think about robots, for better or worse. It's how we've shaped our thinking of the future of learning as well. And I think we're all really deeply implicated here with our love and our fear and our hope for robots. Or at least I know I am. So, thank you. I haven't gone through and looked to see if there's any questions, but if you want to type some now, I'm happy to see an answer.
So we can give a couple of options, Audrey. If you want to take the microphone and ask a question, you can raise your hand. It's the third icon over in the participant window, and we'll give you a microphone. Or if you, like Peggy's mentioning, if you ask the question in the chat and Audrey didn't pick it up, please feel free to put it in again or ask a new one.
Or if I've stunned you all into silence, that's fine too.
So I'm going to give Luis the microphone capability here. Luis, to speak, click on the talk button at the top left. And Luis, we're not hearing you, so turn your mic off. Look for the icon of the microphone with the star, and make sure your microphone is configured. There are some questions in the chat there, Audrey.
Yeah, I think there's this question of, so the educators are the ones that need to decide how robots get used. How do you suggest we make that happen? I think one of the important things to do, and this isn't just in terms of automated, automated essay graders, but I think we need to be a lot more critical about the kinds of education technology that we're adopting, and think critically, be more responsive and active in giving our feedback. I think one of the great things about the rise of a lot of new education startups right now is that they're working a lot more closely with educators in the development cycle. And so I think making our voices heard, and I think pushing back on some of the desire for just what's new and shiny because it's new and shiny, I think is always important. I think we've sort of, although I know that many schools do still struggle with adoption of technology, I think that we've reached a point in our world where we need fewer cheerleaders, and I think we do need to be a little bit more critical about the technology that we adopt.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, just I really like technology, and I enjoy connecting this thanks to my classroom. But I've always thought that technology is kind of a tool that we can use for making our lives easier. Now, to what extent should we let technology to do things for us and for our students? And to what extent should we consider ethics when doing that?
I think that we should, I think that this question of writing is one for me that always is a really important one to think about. On one hand, the argument is if teachers use automated essay, with automated essay grading tool, that it does make their lives easier, that they have to spend less time marking papers, responding to papers, and that would give students more of an opportunity to practice writing. Which means I think practicing your writing is one of the things that actually helps you get better, even more than getting feedback from your teacher. But I think that I do think that we need to ask again the question sort of what to what end. Why would we have automated essays, automated essay grading software, and not students write on blogs and write for the world? Why would students not be writing for each other. Why would we perpetuate this notion that students are just writing for one entity, whether it's a teacher or a software program? And so I think that we do have to really weigh these questions. That I think that anytime we adopt new tools, new technology, we really do need to do a better job of weighing the ethics. And I think it's thinking through what practices are we perpetuating, and what do we have an opportunity to change here through the use of technology. And I would say that in terms of writing, we can have our students write for the web rather than just write these traditional sort of standard kinds of essays that really just went to the teacher.
Okay, Dimitri, I'm giving you audio permissions. I think you know what to do.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Audrey. That was really interesting. As we've seen, universities like MIT and Stanford, with the edX initiative, going to the MOOC thing and offering courses like that, and might, use robots to grade thousands of papers by people taking these courses. Do you think we'll live to see like normal universities, brick and mortar universities, use robots in grading and in normal courses?
I do think we will, partially because I think that there's a lot of money to be made right now, particularly in the move to online learning. Just this week, the California State University System announced that it was outsourcing its online programs to Pearson. And of course, Pearson does work very closely with Newton and does offer a lot of these automated assessment programs. And so I do think that the move to online and is going to be something that we will start to see more and more of these services be outsourced to private companies and be outsourced in particular to software that has some sort of promise of adaptivity.
Thank you.
Audrey, shall we do a final call for questions? Oh, it looks like there's a slowdown on Audrey's part. I don't know if you're still there, Audrey. So Audrey, we see that your mic is on, but we're not hearing you yet. I think it will come through.
Were there any other questions? I'm trying to scroll up and see if there were any other ones. Yeah, let's do one more.
So if you have a question for Audrey, you can raise your hand.
Here.
It's the third icon.
Well, at least the internet held out this
or
time.
you can put it in the chat. Valerie, I'm giving you microphone privileges, but right now there's a slowdown from Audrey's audio, so let's let that catch up before you say anything. And so you can hear she's about a minute behind right now. That should hopefully catch up. Audrey is either on a weak hotel wireless or she's using her 3G mobile broadband card. Judith makes a fun point. Why do audible questions take precedence over written ones? Because they are live, human, and not robotic. Okay, I think we're cleared up now. Audrey, do you want to turn your mic back on and let's see if we can hear you?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Good. we can. Valerie, if you'd like to ask your question, click on the talk button at the top left.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Audrey, thank you very much for your talk here today. I was really particularly struck by the quotes from the children who were interacting with the robots, who said that the robot is a friend, and also the robot better than the parents at helping. And to me, it's just a commentary on what I constantly run into with children. And I work in a very open Montessori environment that we do our best to be very nurturing. We have a lot of opportunity, but still, children, I think, are really missing those kinds of human interactions in a lot of ways, and they are getting them from technology. And both as a parent and as a teacher, it really affects me to hear children talking that way. But at the same time, I know that both parents and teachers can get to the point of frustration too in dealing with the needs of their children when they're under a lot of pressure because they have too many things to do and too many human beings' needs to deal with. So, I'm formulating a question about that, is that what can we do that, for me, the bottom line is we have to get rid of this teaching to the test and this total obsession with testing as a way to evaluate education. And I agree that putting it out to putting it out on the web, letting students go back to expression as the reason for writing, and creativity as being the key to the future. But in the meantime, these robots coming into the classroom could be of help. How do we establish with children that human beings take priority, or that human beings created these robots when they actually become their friends or their parents?
I think that these are all such interesting questions right now, and I think that we're on like I said, it's this really interesting moment, not just with the development of new technology around robotics, but really are having to rethink our human-computer interaction, the ways in which many of us, not just children, are finding ourselves, sleeping, people who sleep with their cell phones, people that check Facebook or check email first thing when they wake up in the morning. So I do think that we need to really think about these questions of relationships. Again, relationships and humanity are a fundamental part of school, but also, what's lacking in the kids' world, what's lacking in the classroom that would make a computer program feel more responsive and feel more personal than having a human standing in front of them. I think hopefully it's a wake-up call for how we interact with one another.
Thank you, Audrey. And have you actually interacted with a robot yourself?
I have interacted with some robots. I have Siri on my phone. I think she counts as a robot. I've also taken some of these MOOCs that have had automated assessments, and I find it very frustrating. I find it unfulfilling, and I think that thinking about someone who's taught, but I care deeply about sort of relationships, the mentoring relationships, their responsiveness, truly personalized, individualized feedback from a human is something that I really value in the human-teacher relationship. And I would be very sad to see a culture that appreciates efficiency and order lose that for the sake of churning more students through more tests.
Thank you.
Well, that was probably a good way to end it.
Okay.
On a no more test. On a no more test level.
If you want to clap for Audrey, hover over the smiley face in the participant and then go down to applause. Audrey, it's always fun to talk with you. I get to do it every week. Fun to have it in this environment so others can hear. Appreciate your being here today. Thanks everybody for joining us. Coming up, let me tell you what's coming up. At the top of the hour, Sean O'Neill is going to be looking at texting your students from Gmail and more, putting it where they're looking for. And then the hour after that, Cheryl Nussbaum-Beach, who wrote the book The Connected Educator, is going to be giving a keynote. Thanks again, Audrey. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.